Hello, I'm Jon Atack.
I'm Sam Atack.
And today, children, we're going to talk about The Great Hack, which is a documentary. It's on Netflix, isn't it? Everything's on Netflix. Or
Probably.
Amazon Prime. I don't remember. That's terrible, isn't it? But there will be a link in the description because when we forget, Spike remembers for us. The Great Hack is not about Daniel Defoe or any of the writers who made their money by feeding popular demand for stories, which is what hacks used to be, like L. Ron Hubbard, for example, with a hack, or a pulp fiction writer, along with Quentin Tarantino. Nowadays, hacking is, and it doesn't mean coughing, there are so many meanings for this word. Makes your hackles rise, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The Great Hack is a documentary about Cambridge Analytica and two whistleblowers, Mr. Wiley, who was with them for a while and has gorgeous pink hair.
Beautiful. And Brittany Kaiser.
And we happen to have Brittany Kaiser's book right here, which we are going to plug. I read a review of it on Amazon where somebody said she's got a very funny way of writing or something like that. And she actually writes really well. So,
cool.
You know, I don't know if that was actually a former disgruntled employee of Cambridge Analytica. And this is basically the story of the Strategic Communications Laboratories, SCL, a group funded to a serious extent, I believe, though the documentary doesn't mention him at all, by a man called Robert Mercer, who was the largest contributor to the Trump campaign in 2016.
And then he gets his hands into the Brexit campaign as well.
Aggregate IQ is part of the same group.
Yeah.
Strategic Communications Laboratories, SCL. And they basically ran the cheating way of getting people to vote to leave the European Union, and probably secured with Dominic Cummings, Demonic Cummings, who we've spoken about elsewhere, who is now the senior government advisor in this country, a man of tremendous ethical resources.
The splitting image version of him is fantastic.
Spitting,
sorry.
You're fine.
Splitting.
He was called a career psychopath by former Prime Minister David Cameron. And David Cameron would know about that.
Yes.
What can I say? It takes one to know one, David. Though he's, ultimately he may do better than Cameron. I imagine Cameron's made millions from public appearances and advertising. Tony Blair did. And where he should have basically spent the rest of his life in prison, whipping himself with wilted lettuce.
Dominic Cummings not great at public appearances, though.
No, I'm not suggesting Dominic Cummings will make his money by becoming a lecturer at Yale University or the UK's representative to the Middle East, which seems a significant irony considering that he's the guy that messed it up. I'm suggesting he may go on to even greater glory. He may become
world leader,
tyrant of the universe or something like that. Who knows? It was king of the world that Boris Johnson said when he was a child, when he was asked what he wanted to be when he grew up. I'm going to be king of the world.
Good.
And when he was asked, after he'd become prime minister, he was asked by a little girl who sat there drawing a little picture, a 5-year-old picture.
Good.
And she said, that you're the leader of the world. And he said, yes. Oh, no, I'm the leader of... No. So in his own mind, who knows what's going on? How did we get these people in charge? Well, in part, through the manipulation of big data. Cambridge Analytica, the story goes back. Strategic Communications Laboratories were involved in the Nelson Mandela election in 1994 in South Africa. And their approach was to use behavioural psychology to get people that they didn't want to vote to not vote, as a democratic strategy, and to get people that they did want to vote. And they were endorsed by Nelson Mandela, who evidently didn't quite understand what was going on. But I think that was the case when he pardoned his former wife, Winnie Mandela, for the commission of the murder of Stumpy McKechnie. And I'd just like to say that she should not have been pardoned, but Nelson Mandela pardoned her. And also recommended Strategic Communications Laboratories. They would later create Cambridge Analytica, which would harvest the data of 87 million Facebook users and create a library with 5,000 pieces of information about every adult American. That's everybody over the age of 18. That's about, I think, 240 million people. Micro-targeting means that somebody can they can be doing political canvassing and come and knock on your door. And on their way, they're looking at their smartphone and they're finding out what medicines you take, therefore what conditions you have, what your political leanings are, and what your buttons are as a Scientologist harassment.
What you're interested in.
Yeah, they can...
So they can build rapport.
Yeah, it's the old faith healers trick used, you can see it in the movie Leap of Faith, where they come and knock on your door and then they go upstairs and look in they say, oh, can I use your facilities? The little boys' room, whatever it's called in your part of the world. The men's room, the bathroom, the restroom. So all sorts of euphemisms because we don't like to say. I mean, it used to be called a lavatory, which means washroom. Yes. But then that was decided, and toilet just meant actually doing your face and stuff. But it's come to take on. So eau de toilette, we still have water, toilet water, quite literally when translated from the French.
Wonderful.
In a bottle. So they'll go into your bathroom and they'll look in your medicine cabinet. And then that night when you roll up at their healing meeting, they'll say, there's somebody in the audience called first name of what was written on the bottle, and they have a heart condition. Yeah. And they can, it's angina. This is that, but whoa, on a huge scale, everybody in the United States. We know where you live. We know your social security number. We know what your kids are called. We know what your shoe size is. We know where you went to school. We know what exams you passed.
What you're reading.
Everything you've bought, everything you're reading. We can even track, because you're using your Nook from Barnes & Noble or your Kindle from Amazon, we can even track what you've read, how quickly you read it, and where you made notes in it.
Jeez. Yeah.
And then we can knock on your door and persuade you. Now, this makes the old-style 20th century cults kind of fade into, who cares about that? So, we've recommended DuckDuckGo as a browser. We've recommended Proton Mail for email because they do not steal or store your data. You're not part of an analytic program. You don't have to sign a contract saying they own all of your children and can eat as many of them as they like. And we're recommending Privacy Badger as well. I am about 100 pages, well, 98 pages, I exaggerated.
About what you said about.
into Brittany Kaiser's book, and I absolutely recommend it because they used, there are data brokers, there are groups like Axiom, Magellan, and Labels and Lists, or L2, who will actually sell data, and they have tens of thousands of clients.
It says that Amazon Kindle and Google Books are selling your data.
Yeah, I've just said Amazon Kindle, Barnes and Noble, Nook. They will sell everything because it's all just recorded.
Oh, and it tracks your location as well.
So the only other, you can, if you use a traditional bookstore, the GPS on your smartphone will still say where you went and which shelves you stood in front of, and which, if you used it to read the barcodes on books.
If you have an automatic cleaning robot, it will tell you the position of your furniture.
Yeah, which is vital to know. And if you then add Alexa, Siri, Google Assistant, all of these things, then the reality is they are recording everything you do. And George Orwell, Eric Blair, no relative we don't think of Tony Blair, could be where he learned all his tricks.
Yeah.
He warned us that in 1984 Big Brother would be watching us, but the reality is he couldn't have dreamed of how closely we are, all of us, now under scrutiny. Again, it reminds me of Scientology when Michael Flynn's first client went to him, Lavender Van Shake. She said, I've tried one lawyer after another. What happens is I go to a lawyer and a week later they get a letter telling them I've had this many terminations this, I've done this in my life, I've done that, and they turned me down. She only wanted a few $1,000s back. Would have been so much more sensible to give her the money. Yeah. The same was true for the Australian inquiry. It was just one guy who wanted a few $1,000s back, and Hubbard decided, I'm not going to give him the money. Such fools. And he didn't believe us, so he turned her away, and then he got the letter. And so he called her back in and he said, how did they get this data on you? And she said, I told them. And he said, it would have taken an intelligence agency 2 years to gather this information. Yeah. You paid them to write it down. Well, boys and girls, we're paying them to write it down. And it may be that you are completely invulnerable. You may be one of those people who's completely invulnerable, that nothing influences or affects you.
I'm one of those people.
I hate to tell you, if you are one of those people, then you're a psychopath. Because they're the only people who are not affected by influence. And even then, if you know what you're doing, it's a little bit, but you can't emotionally influence them, you can't manipulate them in that way. If I know everything about you, including everything that brings tears to your eyes, everything that brings joy to your life, everything that makes you furious, then I can sell you whatever I need to sell you, basically.
I think a guy in the documentary says that when everybody is individuated, it becomes really easy to manipulate people.
Yeah. And the micro-targeting is a reality. It's been a reality for several years now. The kind of crude AI forms of it, where you buy a coffee maker on Amazon and they try and sell you 6 other coffee makers, that they're just doing that to fool you. So there are various browsing add-ons that you can use. Mozilla has Lightbeam, which was called Collusion. There's Clicks, C-L-I-Q-Z, if you're American, Z if you're British. Clicks International's Ghostery, or the Electronic Frontier Foundation's Privacy Badger. And I'd like to thank the EFF for defending me back in 1999 when Amazon stopped selling my book, Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky, for 3 days, because they were informed by a Scientology lawyer that it was a criminal offence to sell it, and they mustn't sell it, which is absolute nonsense. Rush out and buy a copy now. But the EFF really did a great job, and within a week, my book was number 98 out of 4 million at Amazon. And sadly, the publisher didn't pay me the royalties, but life can be tragic in some ways. If you go to these places, you can actually find out how many people are tracking you. And you should find that at least every time you go on your computer, 50 companies tracking you to work out what you're doing, where you're going, what's up. And
who are then selling it off to more people.
Yeah, who can then micro-target you. So shove Privacy Badger on the machine, use DuckDuckGo, Proton Mail.
Did we talk about her Own Your Data?
Yes, we mentioned Brittany Kaiser, who, she's a very good example of recruitment, that it's often thought that people are recruited because they are already, ripe fruit and ready to go. She worked as a volunteer on several campaigns from her teenage years. I think she was 15 when she first volunteered. She'd worked for Democrat campaigns, and including the Barack Obama 2008 election, I think it was. And here she is. She finds herself pitching Cambridge Analytica to Donald Trump's team to sell that, because heck. And I think she doesn't seem to quite understand herself the little increments of dissonance, the baby steps that lead you across the way, so that you suddenly find you're playing for the enemy. You've been weaponized, and the skills that you developed are all being used. Very typical in destructive, authoritarian, extremist sects, or cult groups, if you prefer, that the nicest, kindest, sweetest people end up doing horrific things sometimes, because they come to believe that Jewish people really do all carry lice that will infect everybody around them, which was one of the myths propagated by the Nazis. They come to believe that Donald Trump really is the saviour of humanity and is draining the swamp, though as yet we've not seen any he just sacks all of his own advisors. He doesn't, like Ron Hubbard, he doesn't seem very good at picking people because he has to get rid of them. And amusing to see Rudy Giuliani, his lawyer and great helpmate, his daughter, very articulate, going and talking about that. It's very, very important that our privacy is a fundamental human right. That we've seen in the past that intelligence agencies working for governments will do terrible, illegal, criminal things like killing people, for example. There are small examples and large. The book Spycatcher by Peter Wright, the British government tried to prevent its publication under Margaret Thatcher because it exposed a plot in the Ministry of Intelligence, Ministry of Information Department 5, I think that's what MI stands for. Spike will find out, no doubt. But MI5, the government's own internal, it's like the equivalent of the FBI, it's the internal agency. It has the espionage activities the FBI has. That they had hatched a plot to depose the Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, who was actually one of the few qualified academics we've ever had as Prime Minister, let's say. He was an Oxford professor at Don. And an interesting man. But they decided they didn't like him. And so the intelligence agency decided to get rid of him. I suspect that something very similar is happening with QAnon, that people are actually being manipulated by former members of the National Security Agency and other American agencies. And they are using this stuff. They are getting people just lapping up this absolute nonsense, which we saw at Pizzagate, the idea that there's this cabal of Democrat politicians.
Adrenochrome.
Yeah, eating. And adrenochrome, of course, is the invention of Hunter S. Thompson, and it's his big joke in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas that they've taken every drug you can possibly take, including ether, and now they're going to have the adrenochrome, which is extracted from the adrenal glands. It's a joke, it's a hoax, but it now has very serious money behind it, and it may lead, as we've said elsewhere, to insurrection, to riot in the US where people will be killed, and that is a dreadful thing. That is through the manipulation of data, through the manipulation of privacy, through the manipulation of minds. Mind stealing. I think it was Alan Shefflin mentioned that to me, this idea of mind stealing. Your mind has been stolen. Mine certainly has.
Yeah, long time ago.
Yeah. And this is all that's left of me. I'm an empty shell. Johnny Savaloy stole my voice. So Rush Out by Targeted by Brittany Kaiser. Have a look at the... I think the other documentary is called People You May Know, but we don't know it. We haven't, because we have to pay Amazon money to watch it, which is kind of, it's sort of counterintuitive, paying the people who are manipulating you to show you about them.
Yeah.
So... and Privacy Badger, DuckDuckGo, Proton Mail, be safe, children, and thank you extraordinarily much for sharing time with us. I'm Jon Atack.
I'm Sam Atack.
And fare thee well.
Hi, Jon here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.
I'm an empty shell. Johnny Savaloy stole my voice.